All right. Well, welcome everyone that's listening in. My name is Eric. We're excited to do whatever it is that we're doing here today as we talk about Formula One fantasy for the 2021 season. And for everyone that's listening in, actually, we have a really, really big trio right now. We have from F1 Fantasy Tracker, we have Keiren, also known as Off-White. We have Andrey, who is joining us all the way from Australia. Keiren actually is so this is a massive gathering. Keiren is in England. Andrey joining us from Australia, so it's end of the day for him. Also known as Ritter on the Discord channel, and then myself, Erick with Motorsport AI, all the way in the United States. So we have morning, afternoon, and evening all the way here. Patrick is already giving a shout out on the live chat. Feel free to send some questions. Guys, how are y'all doing today?
Doing well. Bit tired.
So listen, let's kick it off. I'm just gonna start with an easy one. Are you guys ready for this season?
Absolutely.
Yeah, pre-practice 3 will probably determine a few things, but definitely have a beta version for the team.
Yeah, so I'm struggling on my end. Andrey, I know you and I talked about this. I'm still trying to put the final magic touches to the artificial intelligence for everyone that's listening in. Actually, the interesting piece that about this trio is that we all go about making our predictions for fantasy Formula One in completely different ways. So on my side, I'm using Tableau CRM or artificial intelligence to try to make some predictions. I'm going to be going head to head in a league against Andrey, who's using all his methods of statistical analysis to predict who's going to come out and win the races. And then Keiren, on your end, I would say you're probably the most experienced of us all when it comes to fantasy. So you're just coming in this with just legit experience and all of the data you've been able to capture on the Fantasy Formula One Tracker or the Formula One Fantasy Tracker website throughout the years.
Yeah, literally, I'm not deploying any high level analysis like you two are always doing. I'm just using what I know, the context, what I hear. And the website, of course, and try and come up with a more contextually built lineup and set of predictions.
All right. So guys, let's start with the big one here. One of the big talking points that I had this season is kind of like how to put your team together, because both Hamilton and Mercedes are insanely more expensive. I think collectively the two of them are 10 grand or 10 million more, but our budget is still 100 million. So guys, any insights, or how are you guys going about this? How are you all getting started in putting your teams together, knowing that?
Andrey, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, as you rightly pointed out, Mercedes and Hamilton together, they're like 71.5 million. So that leaves 28.5. And what can you really fill it up with? Like, you need some sort of a driver that you will double. That's your turbo, and preferably, somebody towards the sharper end of the competition. And who's that going to be? Like Perez? Then you've got like 2-3 million left over, so that's not an option. So you have to like downscale really quickly, and you really find out that the best turbo driver that you can afford is Raikkonen or Tsunoda or something like that, together with those two, Mercedes and Hamilton. So that's not really an option. I think what you have to, the way that I think about it is every single driver has some sort of a return in terms of points per million of their cost. And what you have to optimize is the points per million of driver A plus points per million of driver B, multiply them by their price, all 6 assets that you've got, and then try to arrive at the largest number that you can. And so my predictions that I've been trying to build, they're based on what was last year like, try to adjust them based on whatever the knowledge that we've gathered from preseason testing, and then see what that means in terms of likely fantasy points returns, and just look for the one that I mean, I don't look for like the script does. Like, it just evaluates all the possible combinations and spits out a combination.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my method. And then I'll probably just make some sort of adjustments as I go along. Because right now I'm being recommended to do Ricciardo turbo, but I don't know, like Perez turbo is probably the better choice for me.
I'll just say this though, like taking out Perez, or like Perez was the biggest points per million, I think. Keiren, I don't know if you run these statistics. Wasn't Perez one of the biggest points per million? Like he was getting so many points and he was average, like he was in the 10 million range. I know his price almost doubled this year, but I mean, I would imagine
last year
it's still
he was
going to
insane.
Yeah, last year he was insane. He was the one to have. I would even argue more than Stroll. Like had Norris started really strong this season, but then he dropped. But consistently, like Perez was the one to have. You know, what do you say? Do you say also no to Perez this year, or what's the situation there?
No, I'm very much yes to Perez this year. I mean, I think what F1 noticed in the last 2 years is that like every winning team basically picked Hamilton, Mercedes at the start and just left their team, and it didn't leave a lot of variations to strategy and how to win. It was just pick Hamilton, pick Mercedes, and kind of just pick 3 other drivers
and you still had enough money left over.
And it didn't allow variation or tactics or anything. So I think this year that's why they moved those prices up, because as Andrey said, if you get Hamilton and Mercedes, you're kind of just left with not great turbo options, no real variations left, and you're stuck with the worst drivers, if you want to call them that. I mean, in terms of like when you're left with these low rate drivers, you're stuck in a position where you have to pick the Haas drivers or the Williams, and when you start to go into the lower tier of priced drivers, the game starts to be not about who's a better driver, but now you're starting to decide who's got the worst car, but reliably the worst car that doesn't DNF, but will reliably beat their teammate to score the most points, and you just can't.
That will qualify last and then gain some positions through somebody DNFing. It's not the right feeling.
I mean, but it's survivability, guys. Russell was a massive asset to have, 2 years ago? Because Russell was just crushing it because the Williams was so slow, but the Williams was reliable. So, you know, like Russell would just dominate the positions gained. You know, like he would consistently get, 6-8 points positions gained every race just because he would survive. And then he decided to start crashing behind safety cars. And, last year he wasn't as good of an option because I think a lot of people went into last year trying to replicate what Russell did for them, myself included. And it just, everyone there just kind of like.
And last year we had Raikkonen do something similar with a lot of positions gained. So identifying that one asset that will, reliably qualify low, but make up some spots. That's definitely like maybe not 5th, but the 4th driver that you want to have on your team. But yeah, I think so far in the Discord, there is a bit of a meta with, the triple Red Bull, Verstappen, Perez, Red Bull constructors, then Norris, because he's severely undervalued. And then something like Gasly, Ocon, Raikkonen, Tsunoda,
Kimi involved, Giovinazzi, Russell. I think that's where the magic pick's going to happen. I think it's hard to go anywhere but the Red Bulls personally. That's why I've advocated it so much. But I think the winner of round 1 is going to be the one who picks that Giovinazzi, Kimi Raikkonen, Tsunoda, Gasly kind of remaining 2 picks and gets it right. So I'd just like to point out, it wasn't because Russell crashed under a safety car last season that made him so bad. It's because he decided to be fast for quali. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's true. He decided to do his job, which we don't like. Yeah. So, tip number 1, don't pick a car that has amazing qualifying pace, but terrible race pace. That will bury you alive on your.
That bears out in all of my simulations as well, because I could go in some detail of how I derived it, because quali, it's pretty straightforward. Everybody just puts in the best lap that you possibly could. But then for race pace, I actually had to go a bit of a wonky way where I started generating simulations of the whole season of 2020 just to see if I could come up with some sort of a version of the car, like some sort of a mean and standard deviation around that mean. And for Russell, the numbers that I get is that he is like half a second slower in race pace than he is in quali pace if you normalize everything to like 100-second lap. And that's going to put you behind every single time. But then, Latifi is like right on the money. It's like 0.1 of a second difference. And so he just, comes in last in quali and just coasts.
Yeah.
What's interesting to note,
that might be Mazepin, I don't know with his Formula 2 track record, but figuring out who the good backmarker is going to be, that's a big one. Go ahead, Keiren. Sorry.
I think what's interesting to note is that despite Russell going so high in quali and then coming back down, he actually scored just about on average the same as Latifi. It's just that they both went around it in different ways. So when people say that, would you rather pick Latifi or Russell? I would still rather pick Russell, because if in the scenario he qualies high and falls back, he's going to score the same. But if he qualies high and there's a hope he holds it, then you get some points. So for anyone that's questioning whether it's Latifi or Russell, personally, I'd go for Russell because there's a bit more hope.
Well,
yeah.
Well, on that note, like just kind of taking on some of the questions here, let's switch gears. What about Gasly and Tsunoda? Because Tsunoda's an interesting one. There's a lot of hype around Tsunoda. I'm kind of curious. And Gasly, now everyone with this article that he put out on the last couple of days, everyone's like falling in love with Gasly, like Drive to Survive, put him on the top of a pedestal, it seems like, because everyone's like now on the Gasly train. So, what are we thinking for Fantasy Formula One between the two of them? Gasly was a good pick last year, especially towards the end.
Yeah, I think it depends on where Gasly or AlphaTauri is. Just in general, like, can they be towards the front of the grid? If they can be, then I would guess that there will be about 3-4 positions between Gasly and Tsunoda. But if they just don't have enough speed, then does it really matter if Gasly is 12th and Tsunoda is 13th? I mean, it's going to be fairly small difference of points other than beat your teammate. And then I'm sure Tsunoda is going to sneak one in from time to time as well. So I think Gasly would need to show that AlphaTauri is actually capable, and that could be due to the Honda engine. Like, there's quite a number of journalists that are talking about that supposedly Honda engine is smaller than size 0 or whatever that means, that allowed them to like make the rear of the car even more packaged and faster, whatever. So if there's a net Honda improvement, not just Red Bull, Gasly could be interesting, but right now I think Tsunoda is more interesting because I don't expect AlphaTauri to be as good as some of the other midfield teams.
That'd be an interesting one, yeah. I don't know. I feel like they're taking Tsunoda for the weight savings above all, just try to make the car go faster.
Keiren, what do you think?
I had to speak to a couple of people that had watched and followed the Formula 2 season closer than me. And when you start to look into it, he could have easily become the Formula 2 champion, no problemo. I think a lot of the reliability stunted a lot of his point gain. So if we consider the scenario where he could have easily been Formula 2 champion in his first season, there's a clear sign there is talent there. And I think there's a lot of hype for him from the paddock as well as a lot of the fans. I think that is justified. And so when you get him in the AlphaTauri, it seems to be an easier car to drive. Obviously, I've not sat in it. I don't know. But from initial impressions, it seems like the car that's much more forgiving on drivers, and it allows them to put more of their talent at work with a car that responds quite nicely. So Gasly's priced quite high because he won last season. And I think if you remove that win from his stats, I think his price is quite high for what he delivers, considering that Daniel Kvyat, if we remove the win, I feel like they both were quite similar on what they delivered. Yet they price Gasly high, and then they bring in a rookie and price him lower. So I'm kind of trying to decide, is Tsunoda going to be like Kvyat, much better than Kvyat, or much worse than Kvyat? And so I try and kind of look at Kvyat's performance over the last couple of years, and I have a good feeling that Tsunoda's going to get in that car, put it where it needs to be, because it's easy to drive and utilize more of his talent. And I think that even if he performs on the same rate as Kvyat did, his price is undervalued and it has to come up. And I think Gasly's has to come down. So I think out of the two, I would personally pick Tsunoda for that opportunity to gain more profit.
So to talk a little bit about my project and the AI piece of it, because a lot of people here are commenting that, obviously Tsunoda is a rookie. You can't put the same type of expectation on Tsunoda because he is a rookie. I ran correlations on the experience of a driver, and I'm running on my AI model. I run two specific correlations. One, the number of races the person has done in Formula One in total, and two, the number of races that a person has done with that particular constructor. And in both cases, like the correlations are usually, they help explain about 18% of the results, which is pretty significant. So, to everyone, to Freda, Patrick, Antonio, you guys are mentioning, the rookie factor, and that's definitely something, at least the data shows that it's definitely there.
Yeah, 20% is quite a large factor, but could the data of, back in 07 when Hamilton turned up and got third place Australia, could the data of, I think talent sometimes will just appear and show itself there. So I
think it's hard to do statistics on or AI on I don't know, potential greats, or potential GOATs. Like that's just well, when Hamilton is a rookie, he's not a rookie. He's a legend in the making.
Fair, but also at the same time, we have to understand that we're living in a world where the cars nowadays are 85% of the trick. So actually, this was a great learning lesson that I had last year, because I had so many attributes on the driver with regards to making predictions last year, that when Russell went from Williams to Mercedes for Sakir, it was a nightmare, because I moved Russell to the Mercedes, and it was still predicting that he would come 8th. Ironically, the irony of all ironies, it was predicting that he would come 8th, but it was also not predicting the race we had. But the problem was that because he's been qualifying 19 or in the bottom 10, 14th, 15th, 18th, whatever the case may be. By the time you put him in the Mercedes, it was like, well, he's always qualifying at the back. The AI was kind of saying he's probably not going to be at the front. The Mercedes is going to help, but he's not going to be at the front. And I really had to change a lot of the dynamics around to put more emphasis on the car to be able to make the prediction that I made, which was that he would qualify second. So it was kind of interesting because, to your point, and going back to Hamilton all the way at the beginning, he did jump in a title-winning Leclerc. So, it's tough to argue, that his rookiness was null and void when he was in such an amazing car.
I think it's just, the Gasly Tsunoda situation is kind of a difficult one. Gasly is a great driver. I think him in the AT is amazing. But I think there's even more context around that. I think you need to consider whether Ferrari is back or not. And if they're back, that means a lot of the midfield's points drop down. If Ferrari aren't back, but say Alfa Romeo gets... Okay, so let's consider a scenario where Ferrari is back. Ferrari gets a even better car. They go higher. That means Alfa Romeo go higher. So that means there's more people for AlphaTauri to fight. Will they do the same as they did last season? Possibly not, because there's more people to fight with now.
Keiren, am I smelling a recommendation for the high-risk all-in bet to bet on Ferrari early on? Oh, I see a scratch in the back of the head. I'm getting somewhere here.
I did post up. I considered if Leclerc did slightly worse than 2019, and then I changed the Ferrari constructor for slightly worse than 2019, but with today's prices, and they ended up being the most valuable and most effective assets to pick. I slotted them into teams, and I was like, if Ferrari are back and you select this team, this is the best team.
Yeah.
But only if Ferrari come back. And they perform just under 2019 levels.
Hey, it's the start of the season. Most people
I did something similar. I threw on an additional 0.6 second gain or loss of time from 2020 to 2021. And that just means Leclerc, Turbo, Sainz, Ferrari constructor, and they outscore Red Bull by 5 points on average. So if Ferrari is back, that'd be really interesting. I hope that happens, because then we'll have some really interesting, constructors. I'm not really sure what to even pick.
I think the game will get messy after that point, because at this point we've just told everyone go Red Bull, and now it's now you've got Red Bull or Ferrari, or you can lean into Mercedes if you want. I think the game will then open up more avenues to be interesting.
So do you guys think that Ferrari could be like second best? Because I don't really think that. I think they could be a reliable third best, so 5 and 6. And even in that case, I think Red Bull and Ferrari are going to be close. And I think you have plenty of time to react if you go Red Bull and then you find out that Ferrari is, 5th and 6th fastest. You can change your team around. Like you don't have to score, ultimate points in every race. You can, build your team as you go.
Look, I mean, I think from my side, I don't think Ferrari is going to make it back to the top 3 in any way, shape, or form. I think this year is going to be an interesting battle at the top. I'm praying, and this is like terrible optimism here, but I'm praying that Red Bull takes the fight to Mercedes and doesn't have that slow start like they traditionally have had every single year. But I'm genuinely excited for the midfield battle because, McLaren has clearly proven they have an amazing chassis over the past couple of years. I am biased because I'm a McLaren fan, but now they have the Mercedes engine back in their car, and I think that's going to make wonders for them. It's the biggest change that's happening around the paddock for this year. I think that's going to bring the battle to the top. Aston Martin, I don't know. I think it's going to be, it's going to be interesting, but the other one, I think the AlphaTauri seems to be coming up. If there's a C class of racing, Alfa Romeo, and their consistency is coming up, there's a lot of people that seem to be edging upwards. So it's going to be genuinely interesting. What that means for and I think Ferrari is genuinely going to be at the top of the B pack, right? At least that's my guess. That's my prediction. But we'll see. But I think Ferrari ultimately is a good high risk strategy if you want to try to put all your chips on one of your 3 teams right on the table and just run it and just say, look, let's see, because Leclerc pulled that miracle podium off in Austria at the season opener. So, let's not forget, Leclerc was carrying a horse on its back with a Ferrari badge the entire 2020 season. So if that car is anything better than what it is, then you'll.
And they did spend their tokens on the rear of the car. So the one thing that was giving Vettel so much trouble is potentially fixed. And Leclerc, he was obviously being able to adapt to it and work around it, but maybe he doesn't have to. And same goes for Sainz. It might be a better car to handle.
Yeah. I think they spend the rest of their tokens on Sainz in general just to get Vettel out of there. But go, Keiren.
I think I was just about to say, considering the fact that the Ferrari engine last year was really bad and the car was really bad, Leclerc still put it on podiums, and I think he nearly got a podium at Turkey. So he's still up there. Now, if the Ferrari engine is even 80% back, what can Leclerc do with a Ferrari that's 80% of its ability that it was previously? I really think that.
Well, if we just put some numbers to it, Leclerc scored 238 fantasy points last season to Perez's 318. So, now Leclerc is much cheaper and Perez is much more expensive, and Ferrari is potentially a lot better. So
There's great potential there, and I think Iceman said in the chat about the Ferrari and Ferrari and the AT engine debate. So I assume he's talking about the Honda engine, about how they're bringing their 2022 spec forward, just to gain that more power. But also, it's a good thing to know that could also mean increase in unreliability because of bringing forward that engine change. So I think one thing I'm looking for is that maybe Red Bull are the best picks for points, but if it proves to be very unreliable, abandon ship. I think we will need to go to Mercedes, because if Red Bull just keep blowing up, it's no use to us. And then that's on the back of, if they've increased their engine blowouts. I mean, Max got P3 in the championship, and he probably could have come P2 very easily if he just didn't DNF so much. If he's going to DNF more this season, then it's just going to be a mess for Max Verstappen and our fantasy picks.
Yeah, no, that is That is true. Max has always been a little volatile and Red Bull in general, but I think that's something you have to keep in your mind because Red Bull is desperate. They're gung ho. They have a winning mentality. They are not happy unless they're taking the first and second steps on the podium. And when someone's pushing that much, right, you're bound to run into some reliability issues because they're going to literally be trying to take every single drop of performance they can out of that car. So,
and I think the same might apply to Mercedes at some point, right? Because if they are being challenged and they're being, put up on the spot where they might have to start looking for those extra tenths, if Red Bull is a little bit closer and they're like, all right, well, we still want to qualify first. And so in a way, Red Bull doing better might lead Mercedes to be more risky or something like that.
Yeah. But we'll see. It's interesting to try to put your teams together this time around. They finally learned their lesson, I think, in terms of pricing and putting some real interesting challenges. And the fact that, again, I think that if Ferrari, to come back to that Ferrari example, if Leclerc can put a stellar drive, if that car is any better than it was last year, and Leclerc can put a stellar drive and get it to a podium, remember, what was it, Mugello for Ricciardo? Ricciardo scored 100 points if you turbo drive for him. 100 points. That was nuts because he managed to have a fantastic race with the Renault. And if Leclerc is clearly capable of making certain drives like that. He showed last year where he was starting outside of the top 10 and he managed to finish 6th or 7th in a car that did not belong anywhere near there. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking about Leclerc too much, but it might be an interesting bet. So I have to revise my teams.
After this conversation, I kind of want to put Leclerc on my team now. It's hard. It's hard to argue. He did so well last season with such a bad car, and it just has to be 50% better, 60% better, and Leclerc is going to use that car and really get some points. And as you brought up, Andrey, he's cheaper, whereas Perez is more expensive. So.
And Ferrari knows what they need to do because all they have to do is look at Turkey, where they got, 3rd and 4th place. Binotto just doesn't have to be there, and then suddenly they win. That's the winning formula. That's all you need right there. So it's like the one race that Binotto skips, and then suddenly everything works well for them.
Should we talk about the mechanics of the game? What's different this season? Something that we should be mindful of?
Let's do that. A lot of people are asking about the subs bank, right? Which is that new feature that's out there. So, does anyone want to take a stab at explaining the subs bank? I know we talked a lot about this before we went live. So
I think Keiren wants to.
Keiren, it's all yours. Do the honors.
I think the wording might be a little bit confusing for what Formula One and Play On wrote. So essentially, you get 3 transfers a week for free. Every time you click save on any team that has a substitute, that counts as a substitute. So if you swap Hamilton for Max Verstappen and you click save, boom, that is 1 substitute. And you get 3 free substitutes between race weekends. You can go up to 6 substitutes, but the extra 3 will cost you -10 each time. Obviously, when you wildcard, the whole thing's for free. Do whatever you like. I'm not sure if we figured out whether that means 12 overall swaps during the week or 15. That has to be decided because the wording, again, is quite down to interpretation at this point. But the subs bank just makes it confusing because they use the word bank. So last year, you could have 1 change for free between race weekends. And that would be the delta between the end of race 1 and the start of race 2. And anything in between that, they didn't care. They only count the end here and the start here. Whereas now, every single save, any change within each save between 2 race weekends at any day with a sub counts as a substitute, and you get 3 for the week or 3 during the downtime between race weekends, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in terms of game design, I think it's a good decision, right? Because being able to make an infinite number of changes, that's just what is the value in that? It's like you're just trying to game something for a marginal value, but it doesn't really mean much in terms of your knowledge of the sport, right? So I think putting a cost that is a little bit harsher and more immediate. So I applaud them for making that change. I think it's a better game this way, but I think it'll also mean that there will be potentially fewer transfers made between races because people will be more hesitant to do much. It depends on when the performance-based increases come, because that's another difference that will that is supposed to happen, but I'm not yet sure how that's going to work. They used to have supply and demand, so market, and the Discord did well. We were able to like kind of anticipate at the rate of sentiment, like when the next movements would come in, and that was good. Now they're saying that there's going to be performance and supply and demand. So what does that mean in terms of timing? My running theory, like the solution that I prefer most, I think, is that once the race finishes, then it's a free-for-all that's based on supply and demand. But at the same time, they calculate what the price should be for like the next race, but they don't apply it until lockout. And they then apply the remaining delta beta. So suppose Leclerc did really well, they calculate the price should go by 0.5 up, and then the market brings them 0.3 up. And then at lockout of Q1, they'll nudge him an additional 0.2 so that he is at the price that he should be, or something like that. That would be like the cleanest system. But I'm just a guy, so I have no idea.
We can only hope. We can only hope. One thing that's really what I'm curious to see this year is last season, the incremental price increases were very small, 0.1 million, more or less each time a driver went up or down. And that's really incredibly small considering the actual prices of each asset. That's an incredibly small amount to go up by. And I think at various points, we had suspected that certain drivers were forced to stay at the prices they were roughly set at. I think Vettel stayed at 23 million for most of last season when he wasn't a driver worth 23 million if you really look at what he can do. So I'm really curious for this season to see if the price swings are larger.
It could be a way to fix the system, right? Because in a way, the way that their system worked is that the percentage picked and the price determined thresholds completely, and there was no way around it. And when Vettel was not particularly highly owned and expensive, his thresholds just worked out to be just like there's only 6 price drops before you reach 0. So he only accumulated, a limited number of those. So if they insert a different method by which like the baseline price drops, that's not based on the market or crossing a threshold, but like just the straight up field price changes, then that will actually also impact the threshold calculation that will happen for the next race and the next race and the next race. So it should make it more mobile, but you just have to rely on them having done the calibration on the mechanics. I can't imagine having that job.
I mean, on my end, I just feel like it's like this subspank is a patch solution to the realization of the challenges of dynamic pricing, because we're talking about it effectively. They created a second game right into the whole dynamic pricing, and their way to try to cut down on that, and people trying to do whatever they can to anticipate the moves and everything was just to put this subspank in place. So, it's like you're putting a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid. And to your point, Andrey, I like your solution better. I think that, like they just should put in one lock price or whatever the case may be, because that way we stay focused on the race weekends instead of day trading players. Because if I don't have the time to day trade, I mean, I run my own consulting practice. I do, I'm trying to start a new business. I have kid, I have a ton of things. Like I don't have the time to be day trading these things, the Discord has been a good place to kind of catch up with,
this is doing GameStop.
Exactly. This is, you could make an argument that we preceded GameStop in some ways. I think we inspired the GameStop guys exactly. I see some eyes rolling around.
No comment. These are allegations, simply no evidence for it. But exactly. I do want to bring up about this day trading that, it was very difficult for us to keep on top of these price increases. So It's a little bit of a plug for F1 Fantasy Tracker and our Discord, but today I'll be announcing that we have actually created a bot to track every single price movement. So when a price moves up, everyone's going to get an alert, and you'll know the moment it happens when a price goes up or down. So you don't have to scour the internet, stare at the fantasy site, keep refreshing. We'll let you know when a price update happens, and that'll be coming out today.
Can that bot say that half an hour before the price changes, though?
That's the premium service, so be sure to subscribe to our Patreon and get that notification half an hour earlier. That's a joke.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah. Andrey, I'm looking at you. You could probably make this happen, though. Wink, wink.
Well, it depends on what kind of data is available, right? So like sentiments, they became more alive as the season went on, and they actually changed like every half hour or something like that. So if you collect enough data, you can, it's like, 75, 80, 85. All right, that, so many hours left until 100 is reached. But I really don't know how many substitutions there will be between races if the limit is 3 saves. I think the predominant mechanic by price increases will be performance based, and everybody will just be making one calculated decision to jump on the one hot asset that had a remarkably, like, maybe call it lucky race, maybe call it like well-deserved win or whatever. But yeah, I think that there will be less speculation as to what might happen.
I think because it's confirmed that the price increases will be based on performance. I think what we've been considering F1 Fantasy Tracker is that, say for example, Tsunoda won a race. I mean, okay, we don't really need to announce that to anyone because it's kind of obvious everyone would go and pick Tsunoda. But for example, let's just imagine a scenario where Tsunoda wins and we didn't expect it and never picked him. We're considering, an option where we recommend to everyone, hey, this guy just outperformed his price, what he can do, and I suspect that a lot of people might be looking towards him, and it's almost like a recommended pick. Use your 2 subs for the week to get him in, ride the price hike because he's performed really well, and we expect a price increase from him, and then later on in the week, revert back to your original pick, or rotate into another pick that's going up in price. Try and utilize at least 1 or 2 of these sub bank picks every single week, and I think we're in a good position to at least recommend to the majority of people when we identify a great performance to pick that guy.
So what about, like, starting to talk about a little bit, using a transition point to talk a little bit about how to build your teams, right? And we can use the rest of the time to give some tips. But someone asked me, yesterday, and I gave him the advice, and I was like, this is the best way I can phrase it for someone that's not actively like trying to day trade and find all the statistics. I was like, look, once the race is over, just go back to your fantasy team and build a team with all the drivers who you think did best for their status, right? Just pick those drivers, throw them in, save, and then wait until the next race weekend. Because if you don't have the time to be managing the sentiment changes and all those items and looking at it, just take a gamble. Chances are you're probably going to net another 0.2, 0.3 by the next race. And then just switch it. And that's the easiest way I found to explain. I'm not sure if you guys have a better idea or a better recommendation, but that, people that are asking, what they need to do in terms of increasing their team value, that was the best that I could come up with.
I think that's a really good recommendation, actually. I think if you wanted to break down, I mean, we've gone quite in depth with the game and try to maximize everything. But if I had to explain to someone who wanted to be very hands off, I would say you pick a team that can score high points on average. It's a long game, it's a long season. As long as your averages are high, you're doing a good job. You probably will beat a lot of people who are trying too hard to make lots of micro changes to ride every height. Just do an average. And yeah, as you say, if any driver performs outside of their status, above their status of where they're expected to be, for example, if Tsunoda wins or if Giovinazzi gets a podium, if you see that happen, just make the swap, put Giovinazzi in, because a lot of people will go, wow, put him in.
Yeah. I think the day-to-day more common scenario will be there's 5 or 6, maybe 7 assets that are due a price increase following a race. And, some of them will be 0.4, some of them will be 0.3, some might be 0.2. And we just want to be able to really identify, like, what is that formula that they use to determine that, and then make sure that you get the one that's 0.4 rather than 0.2. It will be hard, and I don't think that we'll get it right away. I think we need like real data to come in, like actual price changes to occur before we can start learning what the new system will be like. My first expectation is something akin to 2019, because that's just the least amount of work on their end. But I've been surprised by play on before.
Not referring to anything in particular.
Yeah,
not anything at all. So guys, let's talk a little bit about putting teams together. I think this kind of sums up a lot of what we've been touching on. We talked a little bit about that superstar approach of just trying to pair Hamilton with Mercedes and trying to figure out whatever is left. We talked about having a good backmarker survivability driver that can just consistently just deliver points for just making to the finish line. What are some of the top, like for people that are putting their teams together, and Keiren, I know you put a blog post together, let's recently the post qualifying or the post season testing, are you sticking by that, or are you changing it around? Tell us, how should we be building our teams?
I have deviated slightly off of my post testing recommendation, but only because the conversations develop and gaining a lot of different insights and statistics from other people, do you start to consider other options? I mean, at this point, after this conversation, I'm really considering Leclerc, and I'm really considering swapping Schumi back out for Russell. It's always an ongoing thing when you start to consider a lot of different factors. But I think, as I mentioned before, when constructing your teams, you really want to focus on the people that are, one, not overvalued. So if someone's worth so much more than they can deliver, you just kind of want to avoid them, because you can utilize that money somewhere else to maximize points. And on the back of that, you want to start to utilize drivers that are undervalued. And the best example is Norris. Lando Norris will come through and deliver a good handful of points, but they've priced him incredibly low for what he can do. So by having Norris, that allows you the extra funds to pick up a Hamilton or a Mercedes. So you're looking, there are two stats, and I'll be coming out with a blog post to really essentially give a tutorial on our website, because there's really two stats you want to look for. It's average points per race and average points per million. And those two values determine basically how valuable someone is and how much they're worth their money. And ultimately, if they bring a lot of points in all the time. So for example, if a driver was worth 1 million and they brought in 2 points per race, yeah, okay, great. That's 2 points per million. Amazing. But at the end of the day, it's 2 points. So it's about finding the balance between these two stats to formulate a good team. And I think that's why we've ended up with a lot of Red Bull, a lot of Max, and a lot of Perez, because they seem to fit that green zone between the two stats.
So actually a question on that, because it's interesting. What about pairing teammates against each other? So you got to keep in mind, you get 2 points for beating your teammate on a qualifying session. You get 3 points for beating your teammate on a race. So there's 5 points up for grabs there. What are your thoughts, both of you guys, right? What are your thoughts on pairing team members? Because are you nullifying the fact that you're always gonna, win two, not win two, or do you try to predict who, or try to build a team around the teammates that are gonna win those points? Like, how important are those 5 points, day in and day out?
If they both finish, both teammates finish, then you're guaranteed to get those 5 points somehow. If you pick Norris and Tsunoda, but then Ricciardo and Gasly end up beating their teammates, and you get 0. So, but if the opposite happens, then you get 10. So it's a really you either go for the mean, which is 5, or you try your luck and go for the 10. But it's how often are you going to get that 10, and how often are you going to revert back to 5? So for me, it's a smaller consideration, I'd say. I think it's I think points per million, at least initially, make more sense to pay more attention to, because you can design a whole team around that. And then if there are some real caveats, then you can start changing your team accordingly when one of the undervalued or underperforming drivers is starting to perform better.
Yeah. So one of the things that I do in my database is that I calculate the percentage rate of beating their teammates in qualifying and in race. I don't know if you do that, Keiren, with the Formula One Fantasy Tracker, but like one example that stands out to me is that Ricciardo has a massive beat teammate rate, because he was paired against Ocon and he was destroying Ocon for a long time, and everyone that he was up against. Actually, up until Verstappen was before, and that was more balanced out. But same thing with Vettel, because Vettel all time, he did so many years alongside Raikkonen, and Raikkonen was a number 2 at Ferrari. So his B teammate rate is extremely high if you look at it all time as opposed to recent races. But do you guys look at that at all? Is that something you guys even play a factor? Because if someone's always beating their teammate, it seems like an easy pick just for free points.
Yeah, so that is something we do look at. We do have on our site, especially for the last 2 years. But there's, as you just mentioned, there's a lot of context to that. I mean, Vettel always beats his teammate. We had Mark Webber for Red Bull stint, and then Kimi Raikkonen for the Ferrari stint. They're second drivers. Of course, he's going to have a near 100%. So, what in terms of picking people on the same team, the general overarching rule is I say try and always pick the clear first driver, but if both drivers are so good in terms of value and their average points, you're going to guarantee the extra 5 points, whoever beats who, and you've got 2 great drivers. So Ricciardo and Norris, I can't say that's a bad thing ever, because they're both going to be good picks, and you're never going to miss, especially from what Andrey said, like you could gamble and miss out on those extra 10 points with 2 second drivers, and sometimes you'll get the extra 10, but at this point, you're just kind of playing against the numbers, and it's cleaner and easier to pick both Ricciardo and Norris, in my opinion. If I had to answer that question, then yeah, that's what I'd say. Pick both. It's easier.
And at the same time, if you have Schumacher and Mazepin, then you're actually you're looking for those 5 points, right? So you definitely want to pick one of them if you have to, and the one that will beat the other. And same applies to Latifi and Russell.
Yeah, Andrey Almeida here made a comment. It was the one that I had in my mind the whole time. Stroll and Perez. Racing Point was the great example of last year, right? I mean, they were both in the 9-10 million range, and they were like the pink Mercedes was just delivering a ton of points. Presumably, Lance didn't find someone to crash into.
I mean, Andrey makes a really good point in the chat. Stroll and Perez was a no-brainer. It didn't matter if they were on the same team. They were so undervalued. They had such a good car. It was a no-brainer. Your team pretty much all last season was Hamilton, Mercedes, Perez, Lance Stroll, and just whoever you can afford last, and then you've won the game. Well, you haven't exactly won, but you can
you won your mini league maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone with prize pool leagues, you've won that.
Yeah, there is one caveat that I want to add to points per million discussion, because like for example, Mercedes has a particular points per million, and it's lower than what you would get with Red Bull. And then, Ferrari really, fires, then it's going to be even better points per million than what Red Bull does. But you really have to think about how much money you're parking at what points per million value. And if you just put in, if you're going for those like marginal increases in points per million, then you might lose out on the delta in price. Like if Red Bull is 1.5 points per million and Ferrari is 1.6, then you would need somebody at like 1.3 points per million, a driver at 1.3 points per million to make up that difference. And that's really hard to find a driver that returns 1.3 points per million. Like only Norris, I'm projecting to be in the 1.5, 1.45 region. Everybody else is like 1.2, 1.1 and lower. So yeah, you definitely have to think about the constructor first and then base the team around that. So for me, I'm picking Red Bull, probably, unless something crazy happens in free practice 3. After that, Verstappen, because you need to have a potential race winner. Perez, because he is in a Red Bull and turbo. I don't know what I'll do with the other 3, but I'm thinking pretty template. I want to fit in Leclerc, but I think I'll hope for making some money first, so I can then see what can happen.
Yeah. Hantuk HD asked us what are all of our teams at the moment. I feel like it's useless to answer that. I told him, I was like, we're going to change our teams at least 10 times before the race weekend. So telling you what this is right now is just going to be a pointless exercise.
Well, Verstappen, Perez, Norris, Schumacher, Tsunoda.
That's essentially what I'm running. I'm always going to try and run Verstappen, Red Bull, Perez. I think those three have to stay, but I'm willing to swap out Norris if I can fit Leclerc in, and then I have to exchange, I think, my last 2 picks for 2 cheaper ones. And then, but again, as Andrey said, he kind of inspired this, especially is that maybe you want your first initial couple of race teams to be ones that are more focused on increasing in value, because once you get the money at the start, which is where we expect a lot of the price increases to happen, you're rich for the whole season, and then you can run that ultimate team, race 3, dominate, and then GG again.
I don't know, man. I'm struggling to let Hamilton go. This is like a bad girlfriend relationship that I should break up with, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I can make this work. I promise you, I can make this work.
It's been tough.
I want to have Hamilton on my team. I just want to have 105 million first, so that way, the rest of my team isn't, in shambles.
Yeah, I agree.
It'll be really hard to make up, money on like really, I don't know, cheap assets. Like they're just not going to go up by as much, I don't think.
It's a fair point. Listen, guys, it is 8:50. Just a little moderation here. Maybe we should start jumping in on some final thoughts, so that way we can kind of wrap this up. For everyone that's listening in, we've consistently had a good number of viewers sticking around. So whatever we're talking to, people seem to want to listen. So I appreciate the both of you guys. And if you guys liked it, I have to put the page, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, so that way we can, keep getting more people to join in. But guys, just to wrap up, what do you guys have to say? Like, final thoughts on the season that's about to start. Andrey, let's start with you.
I hope it's really close between Red Bull and Mercedes. I really started playing fantasy because Formula One was kind of something that I enjoyed for a really long time, but it has gotten a little bit more boring and like infusing numbers into my life rather than, who wins the race. That's nice, but it's also nice to have like some real competition, you not knowing who's going to win. So yeah, for me, if Verstappen can step it up a notch and like make it difficult for Hamilton, that would be a great season to have. And hopefully there will be, fantasy value in all of the things that will be happening, I'm sure, between races.
Yeah, that's a good point. Keiren, anything on your side?
I just want to start by saying, I've been watching the view count as well. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that's actually tuned in to listen to us. That's 40 people. That's like a whole classroom and a bit more of people. It's very strange to think that a classroom of people have been listening to us. But I just want to say thank you to everyone that tuned in today. And I'm sure you'll be able to catch the replay of this. If you didn't, I'll be announcing that on the Discord. And these guys work extremely hard in terms of the analytics that they help everyone with, as well as themselves. So, be sure to show them your appreciation, because a lot of my sort of decisions are based around their insights as well. I mean, my initial team is effectively based around Andrey's idea of making money first. So these guys are doing great work. So be sure to share some love in the Discord. And I think one thing for everyone, our team variations will change a lot over the next coming days as we look more into the numbers. But really, we're looking for FP3. Once FP3 happens, between FP3 and quali, everyone should be in the Discord asking questions, because at that point we understand where the grid sits, how good everyone is compared to the others. And I can guarantee you my team might change 20 times between those two events.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did put the link in the chat for everyone who's checking. I'll make sure that it's on the description. The website is f1fantasytracker.com. Keiren has the link to the Discord there. There's a ton of helpful statistics. What Keiren said hits the nail on the head. Nothing matters until FP3, because that's when we'll really get the closest idea of really where the pace lies. So, up until now, we're just speculating on, there's a reliable source that says Ferrari has 40 horsepower, like Mercedes is sandbagging, whatever the case may be. We really won't know until FP3, and everything will change by FP3. That is a promise.
So Erick Mercedes won too?
I made Mercedes won 2, but basically what Eric is saying is
Yeah.
everything we've been doing over the last month is useless. Everything's redundant. FP3, that's when we'll tell you
exactly.
That's when everything.
But at least we've got the
useless.
tools ready. We've got the tools ready, and
We're
we can
ready.
change the numbers and see what the returns are.
Exactly. We can look and sound professional until FP3, and then we're like, all right, we're screwed.
Mercedes 1-2. It's going to be Mercedes 1-2. Everyone switched to Mercedes Hamilton, and that's the game over.
Summary of the whole conversation. Everything we've done up to this point is absolute rubbish. You've wasted 45 minutes. Your team should be Leclerc, and maybe Red Bull as your constructor. And with that, you guys are good to win and just make some money.
Win your private leagues, everyone. Win your private leagues. Make sure you get all your friends to put in some money because you're going to win it. All
right, cool. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Andrey, all the way from Australia. I know you made the time and everything. If people enjoy this, maybe we'll do another one. We'll do a couple more in these series. Yeah, I had a good time. Keiren from the UK, I appreciate you being here. And guys, it's everyone that watched. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
So, thanks, Keiren.
All right,
thank you very much, guys.
Erick.
All right, see you everyone.
Bye.
All right, and we're done.